Welcome to Explainer Insight. Today, I'm going to explain the family adventure movie Duma, released in the year 2005. We open on a series of long, steady shots of the African landscape and its inhabitants and their natural environment in South Africa. Monkeys, cheetahs, lions and various birds. It's a serene, peaceful landscape that feels untouched by human hands. That night, a baby cheetah goes for a late stroll by itself, clearly lost. It stops at a fence, but manages to push through the wide opening and then stumbles through to the other side. This sees the wild animal on a road, with a pair of headlights approaching it. It looks like the car might run it down, only for it to swerve off the road. No one. Just in time. Who the driver of the car is, Peter, a local farmer who's on his way home with his son, Zon. Both father and son are equally surprised to find a wild baby cheetah in this part of the country, but they quickly trap and rescue it from an oncoming truck that nearly runs them and the cheetah over. Well, that clearly indicates how long the cheetah would have survived on its own. They take the cheetah home, showing Zon's mother, Christine, the wild cub. They aren't so much concerned with having a wild animal in their house, but more for the safety of the lost cub. So that night, the cub sleeps in Zon's bed and we see a connection grow between the two. As expected, the family decided to keep and raise the cheetah as their own, at least for now. A montage shows the cheetah getting used to his new surroundings, as well as his new family. Same goes to Zon, Peter and Kristen. They all do what they can to adapt to the new member of their farm. One job Zon has is to name the cheetah, and he eventually settles with Duma, the Swahili name for cheetah. A few scenes show Zon and his father bonding on the farm. They built a tree house together, ride on a scooter, do all kinds of things. And of course, Duma they are watching on. One day, however, Peter falls sick and has to go to the hospital. And although he returns after a few weeks, seemingly all right, he's clearly still a little down and things aren't what they once were. Now, one day, while hiding out in the tree house, Zon's father climbs up to have a word with him about Duma, and he explains to Zon that Duma a wild animal and they can't keep him on this farm forever. He continues to tell them that Duma wants to be free, that it is set for him to hunt, trap, chase and live like other cheetahs. Well, Zon doesn't want Duma to go, but luckily his father has a plan. He shows in a map highlighting where they found Duma. He explains that the next weekend, they'll travel to this location, camp out the night and leave Duma behind with his kind. It's a sad moment for Zon, but he knows it's the right thing to do. Unfortunately, before the two are able to do this, Peter passes away suddenly. Kristen then explains to him that with Peter gone, they can't live on the farm anymore and they are going to have to sell it and move to the city. Zon rightly worries about Duma, and Kristen tells him that they'll send the cheetah to a reserve somewhere for him to live. But Zane doesn't want this. He wants Duma to be free in the wild. But Kristen explains that they have no choice. She has to worry about Zon first and Duma second. Zon attends his first day of school, and rightly, is a little nervous. What's worse is that the school has bullies and right from the get-go, they seem to have an eye out for him. And now back home, Duma is being kept inside a small apartment with Kristen's sister. And when Kristen leaves to pick up Zon from school, Duma manages to escape. Duma follows Kristen to the school. Now, while San's in class, he's looking out the window and sees Duma watching. He goes to stand only for the teacher to call him out and orders him to stay put. But then someone screams from outside, more screams, and the class erupts. Zon hurries from the room knowing Duma is the cause. He chases Duma to a locker room, only to be confronted by the bullies. Seeing as they are bullies, they proceed to pick on and beat up Zon. That is until Duma steps in one sight. At that, Cheetah has the bullies. Wetting their pants and fleeing should be a moment of triumph. But as they exit the locker room, a SWAT team comes after Duma. Zon and Duma flee alone now with no one to turn to. Zon realizes that Duma can't stay here any longer, but he also can't let his mother take the cheetah to that reserve. If Duma is going to make it home to live free with its kind, it'll be on Zon to get them there. And so he does. He leaves a note for his mother and then steals his father's motorbike and sidecar with Duma in the sidecars and begins their epic journey. But as expected, things soon go awry. They are cruising through the desert miles away from road or civilization when the engine on the bike suddenly gives out, stranding them literally in the middle of nowhere. Zon now has no choice but to push the bike along the desert, traveling until nighttime, where they come across the wreckage of a plane. Now they set themselves up. They are clearly having no idea what the next step is or if they are even going to survive this. And that night, as Zon sleeps, a wandering vagrant RIP appears from out of the desert and tries to steal the bike from right under Zon's nose. Well, he wakes up and confronts him. Luckily, Rip's not a crazy person. He's just a little lost and saw an opportunity to steal a bike and shorten his journey. But as Zane explains, the bike won't work unless it has gas, which obviously RIP doesn't have. But it's enough to break the ice in. The two are soon bonding. Now, RIP offers Dan some water, but chastises him for giving some to Duma. He then explains that where he wants to go is 5 days' walk from their current location, but they might die of hunger long before then. He pitches the idea of eating Duma as a means to survive. But John has a better idea. There are a couple of parachutes near the wreckage, and using some serious ingenuity, John manages to strap them to the bike and create a sail. Wow! Now Zon, Duma and RIP fly across the empty desert wind in their sails, making up for all the time they lost sitting around. Even better is that now they won't have to eat. Meanwhile, Zon's mom is terrified for her son, and we see her print out missing posters. Using his knowledge of the desert, RIP manages to find fresh water by digging straight down into the earth. However, food is still a problem, but not to worry with Duma there. Surely they can catch something. They put the cheetah to the test, setting it on an ostrich, and soon it's running after the bird at full speed. Well, Duma fails in its hunt, but it does manage to come across a nest with some large ostrich eggs. It might not be a fresh ostrich, but it's still something. And that night, as they are making a fire and enjoying their eggs, John tells RIP of his plan to take Duma back where they found him as a cub. Rip, however, points out that this is very dangerous, mainly because of all the wild animals and their tendency to kill anyone they see. He offers to take Zan halfway, but Zon doesn't look like he trusts RIP one bit. But he also knows he has no other choice. So Zon, Rip and Duma walk the empty desert through the boiling heat. At one point, they come across an ancient stone wall where RIP finds a spearhead. He excitedly picks it up, only to hear a helicopter flying in the sky. The two rush to hide from the chopper, not even realizing that it's Zan's mother searching for him. Although we get the sense that even if Zon knew that he'd still hide out now, the next day they come across an abandoned diamond mine and RIP insists on checking it out just in case they find any left behind diamonds. And once he's gone, Zon sees his chance and with Duma there to make a break for it. But then they hear a crash from inside the tunnel, Rips and danger, and with no choice, Zon runs in to help. As expected, the mine is caved in and buried Rip. Zon hurries over seeing the man's waving hand and quickly unearthing his head so that he can breathe. Rip's beyond grateful. Although he's still stuck and needs Zan to help dig them out again, Zon sees a chance and accuses Rip of taking him in the wrong direction. And despite Rip's protests, Zon leaves him there, half buried, and runs off with Duma. Their next challenge is a river that needs to be crossed. Zon manages to build a small raft somehow, and he and Duma climb aboard as they start to cross the river. But then the current grabs him, and soon they are being led towards a large waterfall. And even worse, there's some gators in the water as the two tumble into the water. The alligators are hunting them. Zon stabs with a spear, calling for Duma as the alligators get closer and closer. Oh, it's a close one, looking like they are going to be eaten, but Zon makes it to shore just in time. Close call, and that night things became a little dangerous. They are truly in the wild now, and we see all types of native animals wandering the desertscape. As Zon makes his way through a dark jungle, Duma unknowingly becomes trapped in a cage. But before Zam can do anything about it, he's forced into a tree to avoid a wild boar that has a scent, and he watches the boar from above only for a spider to have him lose his balance and crash to the ground below. Now the boar is on him, and it looks like Zan's done for. And then he passes out when he regains consciousness. Rip is there, and so is Duma. Rip explains that he found Duma trapped in a cage and saved them both. He tells Zon that he considered selling them both for money, but then he goes on to explain that he was once this man and has done terrible things, including leaving his family behind. But that's not him anymore, and he seems determined to prove it. So the next day, Zen and Rip come across a small group of tourists camping in a bungalow. The tourists have food and lots of it, and together the two men conspire to steal it. They catch a large snake, and Zon wanders into the group and collapses, letting the snake loose. Among them, the tourists explode and flee for their lives, leaving the food unattended. Rip and Zan swoop in and they hurriedly steal it all before the tourists come back. They also manage to steal a canoe and do a little bonding as they begin what feels like the final leg of their journey. Rip gives Sam some precious stones, and Sam gives RIP some money. They laugh and joke, and finally, things look to be going well for him. Another day passes and the two men wander the desert some more. Duma run ahead, and when they find him, he's eating a fresh animal carcass. Well, Zon tries to pull it away, but Duma growls at him, looking like he might attack, repulse Zon back, and explains that Duma's natural instincts are starting to take over. That this is what he wanted. Duma is, after all, a wild animal at his core, so later that day brings into a cave he used to visit as a boy, and soon the conversation turns to Zon's father and death. Now the conversation is a metaphor for change and growth, and it seems to hit Zon in a different way than it might have a week earlier. He's growing and changing as his Duma. They walk across an open plain where Rip grabs in and stops him in his tracks. A quick look over of the area and suddenly RIP tells Zane to run as there are dead flies. These are locusts-like bugs that swarm upon them as RIP and Zan are within range. Rick grabs in and covers them in a blanket, but consequently gets in. Developed and bitten by the little insects, and that night, the effects take place. Rip is sick, barely able to stand as rain pours down over them. Somehow, they manage to get a fire started, but RIP is getting worse by the minute with no choice. Zon leaves Rip by the fire and goes for help, but only after ordering Duma to stay behind, which of course he doesn't. As Zon hurries through the desert searching for help, a small pack of lions catches Sin. But then Duma appears and leads them away, saving Zon even better than during this daring rescue. Duma managed to get himself a girlfriend, but Zan's too preoccupied to realize this, and he finds a small village and explains in a panic that his friend is sick and needs help. While the villagers don't hesitate in giving aid, it's an odd-looking healing remedy, to say the least, but it seems to do the trick. Rip wakes up the next morning only to realize that the village is in fact his own and his family is there. They reunite and he apologizes for how he acted before he left. But there's no love lost, and the moment is a sweet one well earned by Rip. His journey has finally come to an end. Now, on the next day, Zon finally finds Duma and his new girlfriend. He's watching them play and run together and soon comes to realize that although it hurts, this is exactly what he wanted for the cheetah. He has no choice but to leave the wild animal and return home, which he does, and he arrives home sometime later to find his mom back on the farm riding the mower. She sees him in the distance and jumps from the mower running to her son, taking him in her arms. His journey was a long one he's sure not to forget. But now that he's home, John is able to begin the next part of his journey with those he loves, knowing at the same time that he will never forget Duma, and Duma will never forget him. That was all from the video. I hope you liked it. Subscribe for more content like this and hit the like button to help us out. Also, leave a comment if you want us to explain your favorite movie. Until next time, take care.